Welcome to the Deep Dive. Glad you're joining us. If you're curious about where modern ideas like democracy really started bubbling up in Europe, you're in the right place.
Yeah, it's a fascinating journey back looking at um, two big historical moments, the Renaissance and the Reformation.
Right. And our mission today is basically to unpack how these periods, the Renaissance and the Reformation, kind of laid the groundwork for democratic thinking in Europe.
Exactly.
We'll break it all down, connect the dots, and hopefully have some aha moments along the way.
Sounds good. Let's get into it.
Okay, so democracy's roots. Let's start with the Renaissance. What exactly was the Renaissance? It sounds kind of fancy.
Well, yeah, it means rebirth. And it was this period, roughly the 1300s to the 1600s, where folks in Europe got really interested again in the art, the writing, the philosophy of ancient Greece and Rome.
Like digging up old treasures.
Kind of. Rediscovering knowledge that had been a bit sidelined for a while. And this rediscovery wasn't just academic. It sparked a huge wave of new creativity.
New ideas in.
Art, writing, science, how people thought about the world, everything, really.
Mm-hmm.
And, crucially, it got people questioning the way things had always been done.
Okay, questioning things. That sounds important for, democracy later on.
Definitely. It creates that space to think differently.
And wasn't humanism a big part of this Renaissance thinking?
Yes, humanism was a major intellectual movement. The core idea was really emphasizing human potential, human achievements, what people could do right here on Earth.
So a shift away from only focusing on religion and the afterlife.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Humanists celebrated human reason, creativity, individual worth. It wasn't necessarily anti-religion, but it broadened the focus to include human capabilities and worldly matters.
How did that challenge the status quo, like the power structures back then?
Well, subtly at first. By focusing on what individuals could achieve, it sort of chipped away at the idea that your place in life was totally fixed by birth or dictated only by religious authority. It hinted that individuals mattered, that they had agency.
Interesting. Okay, so people are starting to value human potential more. Now, what about power itself? Machiavelli comes into the picture here, right? With The Prince.
Ah, Machiavelli, yes. Niccolo Machiavelli, an Italian thinker. His book, The Prince, is famous or maybe infamous.
Why is that?
Because he took a really hard, practical look at how rulers actually get power and keep it. He wasn't focused on ideals or morality.
Just what works.
Pretty much. What was effective in the real messy world of politics, this was kind of radical because it separated politics from the idea of, divine right or purely religious justification for ruling.
So kings aren't necessarily chosen by God, they're just good at politics.
That's the implication, yeah. He encouraged looking critically at how power operates, based on human actions and strategies, not just religious decree. And thinking critically about authority is, pretty fundamental to democratic ideas.
Got it. Now, another name that pops up a lot with the Renaissance is the Medici family. Who were they?
The Medici were this super wealthy, super powerful family in Florence, Italy. Think bankers, but with huge political influence too.
And their connection to the Renaissance.
They were massive patrons of the arts and learning. They poured money into supporting artists, thinkers, architects, the people driving the Renaissance forward.
So they bankrolled the whole thing.
Well, they were certainly major funders. Their support helped make Florence the absolute hub of Renaissance creativity and thought. And because their power wasn't directly from the church, their patronage helped these new, sometimes more secular ideas spread across Europe.
Which leads us nicely to secularism. What do we mean by that here?
Secularism in this context just means a gradual shift away from religion dominating every aspect of public life.
So not necessarily people becoming less religious, personally?
Not necessarily, no. But things like politics, science, art started operating a bit more independently from direct church control or religious doctrine. The Renaissance, partly thanks to patrons like the Medici, definitely pushed things in a more secular direction.
Okay, so the Renaissance is stirring things up intellectually. People are thinking more about human potential, questioning authority. What happens next? The Reformation.
Exactly. The Reformation is the next huge shakeup, and it starts, in large part, because people were getting really unhappy with certain things going on in the Catholic Church.
Like what? What was the big issue?
One of the biggest flashpoints was the sale of indulgences.
Right, indulgences. Remind us what those were again.
Basically, the church was selling these certificates, you could say, and the promise was that buying one would reduce the time your soul, or a relative soul, spent in purgatory after death.
So you could pay money to get forgiveness for sins.
That was the idea, yeah. And you can see how that could go wrong.
Yeah, sounds a bit sketchy.
It became very corrupt. Critics saw it as the church just trying to make money, selling salvation instead of guiding people spiritually. There was a lot of resentment building up.
And this is where Martin Luther comes in.
Precisely. Martin Luther, a German monk and theologian, he was deeply troubled by this corruption, especially the indulgences.
What was his main problem with it? Just the money?
It went deeper than that. Luther believed people were saved through faith in God alone, solidified not by doing good works or, crucially, by paying the church. He felt the church was fundamentally misleading people about salvation.
So he decides to speak out.
Oh yeah, big time. In 1517, he writes his famous 95 Theses.
95 arguments. What were they about?
There were 95 points arguing against the sale of indulgences and other church practices he saw as corrupt or biblically wrong. He argued the Pope didn't have the authority to grant forgiveness this way.
And he nails them to a church door, right? That sounds dramatic.
Well, posting theses on the church door in Wittenberg was actually like the academic bulletin board of the day, a way to start a debate. But these weren't just any arguments.
What happened?
Thanks to the new printing press technology, those 95 theses got copied and spread incredibly fast all across Germany and Europe.
Wow. So everyone started reading them.
A lot of people did, yeah. And his ideas really struck a chord with those already unhappy with the church. It massively weakened the Pope's authority because suddenly lots of people were openly questioning him.
And this leads to a split in the church.
A huge split. This is the start of Protestantism. Groups broke away from the Catholic Church, forming new Christian denominations, the Protestant churches.
And how are these new churches run? This is where the democracy link comes in, isn't it?
It's a really interesting part of the story. See, the Catholic Church had this very strict hierarchy, Pope at the top, bishops, priests, etc., unquestionable authority. But many of these new Protestant churches, they didn't have a single pope figure. Often, they organized themselves differently. Some had elders elected by the congregation. Some involved the whole community more directly in decisions.
So people in the church getting a say in how things were run.
Exactly. The idea of self-governance within the church community itself. People reading the Bible for themselves, interpreting it, having a role in their own religious life.
That sounds like a pretty big shift.
It was huge. And even if it was about church governance, not politics directly, it planted a seed. If people could manage their own religious affairs, why not their town? Why not their government?
So challenging the Pope's absolute authority in religion kind of opened the door to questioning King's absolute authority in politics later on.
That's a key connection people make. It fostered this experience, this idea of collective decision-making and challenging top-down control, which would resonate later in political movements.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up then. We've got the Renaissance, bringing back old knowledge, boosting humanism, making people question things.
Right, creating that intellectual climate, valuing the individual, thinkers like Machiavelli looking critically at power.
And then the Reformation comes along, directly challenges the biggest authority around the church and through Protestant churches, introduces these ideas of like religious self-government.
Yeah, exactly. So you put those two together, the Renaissance questioning and the Reformation challenging and experimenting with governance.
And you get
a foundation. It wasn't instant democracy, not by a long shot. But these movements weakened the grip of absolute, unquestionable authority, both intellectual and religious. They promoted the value of the individual, and they showed that alternative ways of organizing groups, even governing them, were possible.
So they sort of tilled the soil, made Europe more fertile ground for democratic ideas to sprout later.
That's a great way to put it. They laid down crucial groundwork, changed how people thought about authority, the individual, and community. Later democratic movements definitely built on those foundations.
Fascinating stuff. Seeing how ideas from art, philosophy, and religion hundreds of years ago connect to how many societies are run today. All right, to help you chew on all that, here are a few questions to think about. First up, what was the Renaissance really focused on, and how did that change how people thought compared to before?
And can you explain humanism? What was its main idea, and how might that have sort of nudged people to question hierarchies?
Good one. Also, how did Machiavelli's book, The Prince, look at government and power differently?
Think about the Medici family, too. How did their support help spread Renaissance ideas and maybe lessen the church's influence a bit?
And what were indulgences? Why did they become such a huge sticking point that led to the Reformation?
Who was Martin Luther? And what were the main complaints in his 95 Theses?
How did the way some Protestant churches were set up challenge the old religious order? What was different?
And here's a key one. Do you see a link between folks having a say in their church and the later idea of having a say in government? Why or why not?
Finally, try putting it in your own words. What's one big way the Renaissance helped pave the way for democracy, and one big way the Reformation did?
Mull those over. Understanding these roots really helps appreciate how democratic ideas developed over a long, long time.
Absolutely. Thanks for diving deep with us today.